Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of True Crime with the Sarge. I'm your host, Joseph Jekyll, and today we have with us a very special guest, retired U.S. Secret Service agent Brad Beeler. He's also the author of "Tell Me Everything: a Secret Service agent's proven strategies for earning trust, revealing the truth, and communicating with anyone," which will be available in a couple of months. The link will be shared in the comments section every couple of minutes. Just make sure you sign on there and get a copy of the book or pre-order a copy. Brad, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. Appreciate the opportunity.
You will be our first Secret Service agent we've ever had on this show after a couple of hundred episodes now. So this is kind of exciting for a lot of people here. They're gonna, some of the students and some of the people are interested in a career in Secret Service. Tell us a little bit about what it takes, what kind of education and age requirements it's like. So somebody who's watching is interested in doing this. Just we'll give them the short version about what it really
Yeah,
takes.
absolutely. So for myself, I went in a little bit different way. I would say probably 50 to 60% of the people that come into the Secret Service are either previous law enforcement, transferring over from other federal agencies, law enforcement wise, or coming over from the military. I came on in 1999 and I was a graduate student in criminology and I worked juvenile justice for a brief period of time before I came into the Secret Service. For me, I was an intern during graduate school. I thought, man, I'm just going to get my PhD in criminology. I'm going to learn why people commit crime. I had all these idealistic beliefs. And then during my internship, I was like, wow, this is great. These people have a dual role mission. They investigate, they do protection, they travel the world, and it's a really good group of men and women that are engaged in this. So I thought, man, I'm going to take this the next step further. And just to give you an idea of the application process, it stayed pretty consistent over the last 25, 26 years, is you put in your initial application. You then, if you're deemed worthy, you take a academic test. If you get through that, then you sit down and you have an interview, kind of a panel interview, where they put you in some hypothetical situations. If you get past that, then you move all the way to the polygraph. And that's something I did for 17 years was do polygraph. So if you get through the polygraph, you go to medical, you get through medical, and then you get a job offer many, many times. So after that, you do 3 months of training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. And then you move on to a 3-month academy in Beltsville, Maryland, where you learn Secret Service specific activities. So that was kind of how it went for me. So I would say right now, because so many people like me that were long in the tooth retired, we're really making an emphasis, the Secret Service is, to try to hire and meet hiring goals. And as a result, many people are getting hired out of college for either uniform division or special agent. So now is an amazing time to get hired if it's something that your listeners are looking into.
Yeah, that's great to know, right? So there are a lot of
Mhm.
opportunities, and with those opportunities, there are certain things that they still have to remember, right? Like so having a good solid background, right? And that,
Yep. Yep.
I'm sure they do drug testing and all the other
Mhm.
things that go along with it too. And that's kind of and the one thing that I think a lot of students and a lot of people don't worry about too much is this use of social media.
Yeah,
Is that something the Secret Service looks
it
into
is.
before
It is.
hiring somebody?
It is. Before you send that tweet, before you send that Instagram message, just understand back in the day, our background checks were going to neighbors and knocking on doors, right, Joe?
Yeah.
When we were young, people would put things in their diary and put it under their bed, and no one ever saw it. Now people put their diary out for everybody in the world to see and update it daily, right? So as a result, just be careful what you put out there, because it is going to come back to potentially harm you. And I will say, I'm not going to get into polygraph too much, but I will say, as long as you are honest on your application forms, the good, the bad, and the ugly, just put it down there. You'll have a lot less problems throughout the entire process. Is that we're not looking for perfect people, but they're looking for perfectly honest people.
Right. And that is good advice. All right, let's jump into the interview, interrogation, and detecting deception, because I know the audience was keying up on certain things. Like, I hope we don't break up any partnerships today, but we'll set some people up. But there is an interesting story that I read it in your book about this Chihuahua and basically how it affects perception. Which I said, you know what, we got to talk about this because
Mhm.
everybody does this at one time in their life at least, but sometimes people do this other day. Tell us what that whole incident, that
Yeah.
that perception came out.
Yeah, Joe, it's horns and halos, right? So before I get into this story, I'll say, as a cop, you would put horns and halos on people when you did a car stop, right? And in that standpoint, horns and halos can be very good. They can keep you alive when that hair on the back of the neck stands up, because that first impression, you see someone's hands, you see their face, you can make an interpretation on whether or not this person is going to hurt me or my partner. This, however, comes into problems during interviews. So I'll kind of throw out the story there. My partner and I were doing a search warrant. It was about 3 years ago now, right before I retired. And we're going through the house. We're clearing the house, and we come into the kitchen, and there is a pit bull and there's a Chihuahua. And so inevitably, you understand that there's notions out there about pit bulls that they can be a little vicious. So we had metaphorically put horns on that and halo on the Chihuahua. I didn't want to have to shoot this dog. No law enforcement individual wants to have to shoot a dog. It's a family pet, but it wasn't very happy to see us at that moment. Well, while my partner and I were focused on the pit bull, the Chihuahua kind of came around behind me, unbeknownst to me, and jumped up and grabbed me between my legs in a very delicate spot. And if it wasn't for my fire hose type material pants, I think it was like Duluth Trading Company, my wife had just bought me these pants. I might not be chatting with you, or be chatting you in a different octave right now. But my partner still gives me grief about that to this day, is that it's a metaphor. I bet it actually happened. But as far as how we assign horns and halos early on when we talk to people, and I'm sure many of your listeners can understand this, they've met people and they said, oh, I don't like that person, a terrible first impression. And it takes multiple interactions to get back into someone's good graces, and vice versa. Somebody makes a great first impression upon you, and then confirmation bias kicks in. And we always look for things that are favorable to that initial impression. And that causes a lot of problems in investigations. You can look at the Amanda Knox case, where the Italian police immediately had a bad first impression upon her reaction. And then they viewed everything that she did through that prism of she's our person. And obviously that wasn't the case. So we have to be very careful in law enforcement about, one, putting too much stock in first impressions, and two, and we can get into that if you want to go further, how can we make a great first impression?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because it's actually an important part of getting a job even. So you have young people getting out, because I have plenty of college students that they're, you're getting out, and I always tell them, looking the part. You have to look the part. That's really important. But let's talk about that. How important or not important do we put too much importance on that first impression?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do. As far as when I say first impressions, so it's a big misnomer. So first impressions are an instantaneous, within 1 second, my eyes and my ears picking up, is this person going to hurt me? That's it. So most of the time, first impressions, unless you're walking down a dark alley or unless you're in law enforcement, a first impression is not giving us a lot of help. It's giving us a false read. What we want to do is we want to look at multiple interactions and use all of our senses to be able to come up with a much better impression. So the way I like to hack a first impression, if we want to keep calling it that, is preparation for the first thing. I want to scour the internet. And like, if you're applying for a job, you want to know everything about the company. If I'm going to talk to somebody, I want to know everything about them. And the fact that there's so much information out there nowadays that I can utilize, I can find pain points in their life. I can find out touch points that I can hit on at a later point in which I can ingratiate myself to them. So that's something, preparation first. Second, what I wear in the morning. All right. I want to look the part. If you're applying for a job on Fifth Avenue, you want to look the part. Okay. So people are going to make that impression. So make sure you dress up, because that makes it's really hard to walk back from that if you do a poor job there. Secondly, handshakes. The world's perfect handshake. It's easy to hack. It's easy to do. There's science behind it. So if I asked you, Joe, what's a bad first handshake, what would you say?
Limp and wet, no eye contact.
Yeah. I mean, you hit almost on all of them. Limp, wet, cold, lack of eye contact. So a couple things you can do to kind of hack that. For one, if I know I'm going to have a bunch of interactions, if I'm going to be speaking at a big engagement, or if I got a big polygraph coming up or a big interview interrogation coming up, I would put spray on clinical antiperspirant on my hands. So I automatically eliminate being able to exude moisture in my hands. Also, I'll never hold a cold drink in my right hand. We always shake with our right hands. I'll hold a cold drink in my left hand. If I got a coffee, I'll hold it in my right hand because it's warm. If I'm seated down and I'm about to stand up to greet people, I'll actually be seated on my hands to warm them up. So right then, I know I've got a dry and I've got a warm handshake. And I'm also going to make sure that my handshake is equidistant for them. I'm going to be above the navel because I don't want to be too high because that's a threat. And I also don't want to be too low because that's viewed in another light. So I want to meet them halfway, and I want to show my palm. So what we're doing here is during COVID, a lot of times, are we doing a knuckle bump? Are we doing, an elbow? What are we doing here? So I want to identify early that this is going to be a handshake. And I want to be slightly clockwise, so like a 1 o'clock position. The reason being, I want to give a good landing area. I want to show them that lighter part of my palm, that I don't have a weapon. I'm not here to hurt them. And we tend to pronate as humans. All day we sit there and we type. So it's natural for them to raise their arms up in a pronated position. So they have to do very, very little. And it's not a shake, it's a hold, a very, very, very brief hold. When you see these shakes, we talked earlier offline about all the stuff we did at the United Nations. When you see these long handshakes, those are two world leaders at a press junket. When we do handshakes normally, it is a brief hold while we're making eye contact. The only thing that breaks that eye contact is so we don't miss that midair refuel. So we look to see that we make good contact, and then we go back to eye contact. So that's the world's perfect handshake. I tend to lower my voice just a little bit because in evolution, a higher pitched voice carried further into the fields and forests. We didn't have 911 in our tribal heritage. So I slightly deepen the tone of my voice because it makes it come off like I'm less stressed in this situation.
Right, because sometimes you might be meeting somebody really important, the head of a company
Yeah.
or what have you, and it could be intimidating for the person. So these are all pretty good steps. But yeah, one of the things that always makes me nervous is when they take their hand and then, like, they wipe it on their shirt or
Yeah, yeah,
pants first,
yeah.
and then they read, and you're just like, oh God.
Yeah, or they do that before they shake your hand. All right,
It's like,
it's
oh boy.
symbolizing that I'm nervous. I'm trying to control those nerves. So if you do this before you're in eyesight of them. Also some people nowadays are so anxious about interactions, speeches, things like this. There's things that you can go to the doctor and talk to your doctor about. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not saying do this, but you can get a beta blocker that literally is very, very short-lived that can help you with social anxiety.
Here's a question Proud American has. That's two men shaking hands. How do you shake a woman's hand? Is there something different? Is there a different kind of thing that you got to do with that?
That's a great question. And I'll say this for the people that are listening in your audience. If you're a female out there, you've probably had somebody shake your hand like you were a queen. And how do you view that, right? You view that almost as,
Yeah.
what kind of disrespect are you showing me here? So if you're a male, obviously I might have a little bit different grip, but I'm going to match their grip. And if you're a female, you need to come in there, same principles, a nice firm handshake. If you offer your hand up like I'm Princess whatever, then you expect to get a handshake like that. So don't do anything different. Female listeners out there, I want you to shake your hand, boom, just like anybody else would. And you should expect that they do the same to you as well.
Right. That was a good question, Proud American, because you know what? Sometimes you don't think about that, and there might be somebody in the audience that thought the same question and didn't do it. If you have any questions as we're talking, just please try to put a QQQ in there, because as the things are flying up, sometimes it's difficult to see. So we've met this person now. We shook their hands. We made the eye contact. And is this where the rapport now comes into play, or is there another step in between that?
Well, so you're close. We're almost there. I mean, you've interviewed lots of people, but first we're going to start off a place of, I hate the word interrogation, but it's what's always been there, right? We're trying to obtain the truth. So in order to obtain the truth, what I need to do is I've done my homework on the front and I've made a really good first impression. Hopefully I now have the best environment for the exchange of information. And the analogy I like to give is for people in the Catholic faith. What is the confessional setup like, right? It's in a private place. It has anonymity. You go in there, you don't really look at each other. The vocal tonality is down. The volume is down, right? If there was a microphone like we've got here, and it was in the confessional, and there was a camera in the confessional, or it was a fishbowl, the amount of information that was exchanged would go down significantly. So the next step we want to do is let's pick a place that allows for privacy, that allows for non-judgment. So we have to look at, what does a doctor's office do? What does a therapist's office do? What does a confessional do? And let's try to mirror that as far as when we pick the time and when we pick the place. I don't want to have a conversation with somebody at work at 4:30 and they're thinking about picking their kids up or thinking about dinner. And I also don't want to have that conversation at 8:30 in the morning, right after they got out of a 2-hour commute, right? So when I pick the time, maybe 10 o'clock for me is an optimal time. Where I pick the place is now the next component. Then when I do sit down, I've picked the right place, we've picked the right time. What I want to do is I always like to, there's an acronym I like to use called FEEL, Family, Education, Employment, Leisure. I find that I really get a lot of rich information talking to people when I focus on leisure activities. Family activities, it's kind of transactional. Employment, education. Look, if it's a job interview, you'll be talking about those things. But what people choose to do in their free time, I think is so valuable. For instance, if I asked you, and Joe, you don't think you have a lot of free time, right? I think you're the busiest man
Not,
that I've met recently.
not much.
But if that even was the case, I would then follow that up with, well, if you did have time, what would you do? Or in a
Right.
perfect world, what would you do in your free time, Joe? Let me ask you that question.
Right. So I enjoy going out on the water. We have, go out fishing or go on the boat and that kind of stuff.
Okay, and then I'd follow it up with what kind of boat you got? Center console or bay boat? What do you have?
Yeah. So center console, fishing boat, walk
Oh,
around, that kind of thing.
okay. I mean, so you're going out into the ocean to fish, open water?
No, small boat, 16 footer. So, back bays, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
if the ocean is not too bad, you can go into the inlet, but you wouldn't go too further than that.
Okay. So what I like to do in situations like this is I like to have you teach me, right? So I would have you teach me about the fish, what's in season, how you're approaching that fish, what gear you're using, what lures you're using. Because when you're doing that and you feel like you're teaching me and I'm showing genuine curiosity, tactical curiosity, you're bathing in your own dopamine. You're talking about something you love. There's no cortisol coursing through your veins at this point. And as a result, you're associating me with that dopamine, with that good time. And all I'm doing is just throwing in a couple little questions, kind of like bait. Okay. I'm just throwing a little bit of bait here and I'm trying to hook you to get some information. All right. And I'm also using terms of something you like. Like I use bait, I used hook, I use things like that are going to help enhance that communication. So I may not fish, but I may do something for the same reasons that you do fishing. Maybe it's to get away from the hustle and bustle. Maybe it's because of nature. Well, maybe I like to go out and do X, Y, and Z for those same reasons. That's where we can connect. And what I really caution people, Joe, and I know you've seen this, is when people talk fishing or hunting or working out, what's the thing that comes after that, right? You say, hey, I caught this fish and it was this big. What do a lot of bad listeners do? Oh, yeah, I did too. Oh, or if you ran a marathon, oh, you ran New York? Oh, I ran Chicago. Or if you did this, we don't let people share in their own spotlight. We don't let them bathe in their own glory. I need to let you tell your story and I will accentuate it. And then if it comes back to me and I have those similar interests, I can go there. But too many times we're these fun suckers that take the spotlight away from people. And I'm sure you've seen those people, unfortunately.
Yeah, so and it happens, but yes, it's interesting. So you try to find something. So this whole rapport building part, you like trying to find something that the other person's interested in and talk about it. But I always warn people too that if you're not going to ask questions about it, don't pretend like you know about it, because if you
100%.
don't know about it and you get caught in that kind of thing, it kind of ruins that whole rapport,
Yeah,
right?
it can be very evident. And I would say to your listeners, also be very, very careful about this because people will weaponize this for ill will, not just with scams, because we saw this a lot in the Secret Service where people would, based on social media, one, they'd find out when you were traveling and that's when they would break into your house, but they would find out your likes, your interests, everything you've thumbs up, everything that's important to you. And they can create the perfect person that would be most likely to either scam you or be able to be in a romance with you. Okay. Imagine if I knew everything about you and then I met you on eHarmony or whatever the dating application was, I can hack those first initial impressions because I know so much about you. So just be very, very careful about what you put out there and how people may be maliciously using that against you.
Yes, we are going to talk about social media a little later on in the show, but for those of us just joining, we have 125 people that just joined into the room. We're speaking to retired U.S. Secret Service Agent Brad Beeler, author of Tell Me Everything, which is going to be published in a couple of months, but the link is being shared in the comment section. So we're building rapport, we got this kind of relationship going on. It could be like a photograph on the wall, right? You walk into somebody's home, you're gonna do an interview, and they see, maybe they're wearing a baseball cap of a team
Mhm,
you like, right? So you try to find something that
mhm.
goes along with it. At this stage that you've gotten this far now, you've made your first impression, you started building rapport. Like, do we just start jumping in and asking questions, or is there like a pause, or what do we do here?
So many times when I'm talking to somebody, whether it was an applicant or in the hundreds of situations where I've talked to pedophiles, murderers, or we perceive that they might have been involved in that. That is a significant life event for them to be in the room with me. Their heart rate is going to be high. When someone's heart rate gets high at a certain point, their ability to recall information is muted. And so what I want to do is I want to spend enough time with them and get them, once again, not talking about things that bring on cortisol, but dopamine, serotonin, things along those lines, those neurochemicals, in that I bring that heart rate down. And that may be something as simple as, hey, what can I get you to drink? What can I get you to eat? Would you like to use the restroom? But, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, too many times we try to get to the higher up that pyramid, we try to be their friend. It takes 6, 7, 8 interactions to be someone's friend. I don't have 6, 7, 8 interactions in me. Agent Pirro with the FBI that interrogated Saddam Hussein over the course of 4 or 5 months, he had that opportunity. I'm never going to get that opportunity. So I want to make sure they're safe. I want to make sure they're fed. They have something to drink. I want to make sure they feel like they are in a good mental space. That's pretty much all I have in the couple hours that I'm going to be dealing with them. So once again, that may be breaking bread with them. I can't tell you how many times I've broken bread with individuals. And if they're eating, not only am I getting reciprocity by providing them something, but mammals will not eat when their heart rate is over a certain point. They will just, I'm nervous, I can't eat. If you watch a deer in the field, if it's concerned, it won't eat. If it's not concerned, it will eat. So that's a good barometer for me to determine, now, is this the right time for me to maybe ask some of those questions? Hey, walk me through the events, walk me through the situation, because now they're in a better headspace for me to obtain good, actionable information.
And you hit a trigger word there, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So that when anybody who's studied anything, including business administration and everything, that knows all about Maslow. And that probably would be a future quiz question. I do a quiz question just about every day in the post section. So we try to look for new and exciting quizzes. And maybe, you know what, folks, we'll do something on Maslow. So look, a lot of people want to talk about detecting deception. Right,
Mhm.
like that's always the thing that everybody wants to jump right into it, but all these steps have to be done first before you can
Yes.
do it. Right, know what you're dealing with, who you're dealing with, and I think a lot of times people worry about a significant other or a
Mhm.
coworker, that kind of stuff. So, what are some of the simple steps to detecting this? Because nothing's foolproof. We know this.
Nothing. Absolutely. And that's the first cautionary thing to put there. When you read a book, a blog post, a TikTok, where somebody says this always works, this is 100%, this is 90%, they're lying to you. They're selling you something in snake oil. That's not the case. Paul Ekman did a study in 1991. It's the biggest study that ever looked at detection and deception. Took 20,000 people. They watched 2 different videos. And this ranged law enforcement, college students, judges, all different socioeconomic statuses. And they came out at 54% effective. So we are bad at this. So what are some things we can do to potentially help yourself? Okay. Meaning we're not talking about getting to 90%, but if we can get up to 70, 75%, that's great. Okay. So a couple of things that I like to look for is communication is, got open-ended and you have closed-ended questions. Open-ended is, I want you to visualize. So Joe, do you have a dog at home?
No pets.
Okay. So let's say you had a dog and you had to take it out. There's going to be a time and a place where you want to let that dog off the leash. When you let the dog off the leash, that's an open-ended statement, whatever. They can take you where that dog can go wherever it wants. And they're very useful. The problem with an open-ended statement is what? They can omit things. They can go wherever they want. So there are certain linguistics we can look for in an open-ended statement where they are transitioning from point of time to point of time. They may say, so, then, next, after that. Doesn't mean they're lying, but it's a transitional time. And many times in transitional times, that's where the lie is. So what we'll do when I hear those is I'll hone in on that time frame. So if somebody said, yeah, so then I went to the convenience store, and then after that, I went here. I'll find out what they did right before the convenience store and right after the convenience store. And that's when I'll move into close-ended questions where we put the dog on the leash. And when we put the dog on the leash and we ask yes or no questions, the overall thing that I want to get across to people is, did they answer your question, yes and no? And did they do so in a timely fashion? And if they didn't do it in a timely fashion and they didn't give you a yes or no, it's a red flag. Okay. It's not 100%, but I'm going to follow up with additional questions. So delay for me is one of the most common, because if I asked you, Joe, what'd you have for breakfast? Oh, I had yogurt and granola. Easy to remember. You just did it a few hours ago, right? If I ask you what'd you have for dinner 5 days ago, you might have to think about it. So if I ask you a question that should be on the tip of your tongue, and all of a sudden I get delay, or I get a repeat of the question,
Yeah,
that's a red flag.
what I had
Okay.
for breakfast.
Yeah.
What did I have for breakfast? No,
Yeah.
the guy next to you.
There you go. Yeah. So that's something to look at is delay. Also, vocal inflection. Okay. And what I mean by vocal inflection is how do we answer the question? Okay. And if I had my eyes closed and I just was listening, would I put an exclamation point behind that answer, behind that yes or that no, or would I put a question mark? Meaning, I can't tell you how many times with applicants I've asked, did you murder anybody? Did you rape anybody? Did you do this? And it's no, no, no. Like you could almost put a question mark behind that no. To me, that I'm going to put a little tick mark there. And if they have problems on my test, that's something that I'm going to go back. So once again, how they answer your question is something. Exclusive qualifiers, anything with an LY, usually, normally, for the most part, they're not answering your question yes or no. I'm not a big believer when somebody says, I swear to God, that's a huge problem. I have a lot of innocent people that are religious people that say that. But the yes and no should stand on its own. You shouldn't have to spice it up with anything outside of the yes or no. So for me, the easiest thing to look at is, did they answer your question? Did they answer it in a timely fashion? And is the body language congruent with the vocal message? So body language is a terrible way to determine truth and fiction. People are like, oh, he didn't look me in the eyes. Well, people that look you in the eyes at a greater percentage, many, many times are the ones that are lying to you. But if I'm shaking my head yes while I'm saying no, or I'm not, doing this and saying yes, I'm going to trust the body language in that sense, because that's something that's almost happening on a subconscious level. So I threw several things out there, but I think delay is the easiest one to look at. And when you see it, I want you to follow back up with additional questions.
Right. I wish reporters would do the same thing when they ask some of these
Mhm.
politicians questions,
Right.
because one thing I also want them to stop doing is asking a compound question, right? Asking two questions at a time, because we know you're never going to get the answer to at least the first one.
Yeah, compound questions, or saying a negative question like, hey, you didn't do that, did you? I mean, you're making it too easy for them to lie, right? Lying is hard, meaning if you want to think of a film, like an old film reel as your memory, telling the truth is just rewinding the film reel and hitting play. Lying is, oh, I had to cut what happened out and I had to insert a new fact in, and then I got to repress what's there, and then I got to watch you while I'm speaking it to see if you're receiving it. There's a lot of cognitive load that's going on there. So anytime we make it easier for them to lie by asking a compound question or asking a negative question, that's a problem. So in that sense, I'd just say, did you shoot that man? Did you go to the convenience store? Something that can easily be answered yes and no. And if I have evidence, I want to be very careful about how I lay it out there. Meaning, if I knew he went to Joe's house and I think he might have got a gun at Joe's house, I won't ask the question, did you go to Joe's house? I'll say, what did you do that day? And did you go anywhere else? Okay, you were playing Xbox. Okay. What game were you playing? Oh, okay, that's great. Did you do anything at all after that? So what information did I get from that? He's not saying he went to Joe's. If I said, did you go to Joe's? Oh, you know what? Yeah, I did. I had to go get an Xbox controller. Yeah, that's what it was. I'm giving away too much information. So, as a result of that, now I may be able to subpoena Microsoft. I may be able to do forensics on the Xbox to basically have a provable lie. In addition to anything, we always hope they're going to give us the confession, because that's one of the strongest things you can have in a case. But if I can get a provable lie at a starting point, that's wonderful.
What is the lying by omission? Because a lot of people say, well,
Yeah.
they didn't actually lie. I didn't actually lie. I didn't say anything. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. So a lot of times you'll see that where, like, I'll ask my daughter, did you get all your homework done? Oh, I got all my math homework done. Right. I mean, she's being honest. She's saying she got all her math homework, but what is she omitting? The fact that she didn't get her social studies, she didn't get her English homework done. So a lot of times it's part of a true sandwich where they'll give you a little bit of the truth to lower that spotlight effect. And then what they'll do is they'll give you a little bit of truth on the other part. You saw this with Jerry Sandusky when Bob Costas asked him, are you a pedophile? Very legalistic term. Jerry did not feel that way. So he said no. But he did a very good job of following up and saying, are you sexually attracted to young children? That posed a very big problem to Sandusky. So he said, am I sexually attracted to young children? Sexually attracted, delay. And then he followed up with the truth sandwich where he said, no, I like spending time around with them. I like hanging out with them. He's giving you truthful statements, but he's omitting the part that he is sexually attracted to children. So that's where that is. We don't want to lie, and we feel as if we can dodge around it. And that's the most common lie that you will see. You're going to have that happen to you 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, and it's usually going to be by your loved ones. Some of that's because of social lubricant, just like alcohol is a social lubricant. Deception is, especially lying by omission. If we were totally honest, our relationships would fall apart pretty quick.
Probably. Well, I just saw in the comment section, but I lost it. But Flora had said, "I shot the clerk. I shot the clerk." You know, the my cousin Vinny type
Yeah.
of thing, where you can actually get the answer you're looking for, but it's not the one that you're looking for, and that becomes a huge
Well,
problem for you.
Well, and if you've got a real quick second, I'll tie that in with confirmation bias. So was working a biker case in Illinois. It was a 1%er and a hangaround. And I didn't know too much about bikers and biker crime at the time, but there was a missing person. They were both dating this individual, and they were also friends. So it was a very convoluted situation. But the ATF individual working the case said, hey, this 1%er, he's a bad dude. I mean, he's probably killed people. We just haven't been able to bring a case. So I was going to do a polygraph on him, and it was about, did you cause the disappearance? And so I decided, you know what? I'll start with the hang around. He's 5'6", 140 pounds, dripping wet. And he failed the participate question. And that can mean you did it, but the working theory was that this guy may have seen something. He may have been an accessory after the fact. So for multiple hours, I'm talking to him, and he keeps saying, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. But my tunnel vision was, I'm not saying the right things. I'm not doing a good job in my themes, whatever the case may be. Luckily, an eagle-eyed detective was sitting outside the room, and she hadn't had any involvement with the case. And she keeps hearing, that's not it. That's not it. It's not him saying he didn't do it. He's just saying that's not it. And finally, she stepped in. Hey, can I talk with him for a few minutes? And that's when you got to let your ego walk out of the room. And she walked in. She listened, I think, for about 27 seconds. And she said, hey, John, you keep saying that's not it. Tell me what it is. And he's like, oh, I killed her, and I cut her up in 6 pieces and threw her in the river. And it was just like that. And my confirmation bias had led me down the wrong road, and I wasn't listening specifically to what was said.
Right. And for those that might not be familiar with the outlaw motorcycle gangs, the 1%er refers to the 1% of all criminals, and the hangarounds are ones that want to be gang wannabes and just haven't made it there yet. So I wanted to thank Black Whiter for that gift of the membership. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. One of the problems that you're dealing with in the interrogation room, let's just call it that. I guess we're going to have to discuss Miranda, right? So when does that suspect's rights kick in? We'll break it down for the normal everyday person, because there's a lot of TV has done probably the worst thing that it could ever done to Miranda.
Yeah, where you think that just because you got handcuffs on right after I arrest you, that I'm reading Miranda, and that's not what it is. It's custody, control, and questioning. Right. So you have to be in custody. You have to have the perception that you're not free to leave, that we have control over you. And then we're asking you questions about the case. So I can ask you biographical questions, name, date of birth, all that information. That does not apply to Miranda, which in one of the great ironies of history, Ernesto Miranda in the 50s was the Supreme Court case that this came about. His case was dropped as a result of him not being provided those guarantees. He, in the 70s, would go around signing Miranda cards. That's how he made money. And he was actually stabbed and killed. And the individual that they were questioning about the killing invoked his Miranda rights against self-incrimination. So one of the great kind of ironies of history is that Miranda is something that can be, it should be given. It's not hard to get past. The way I do it is, hey, John, obviously I'm going to be asking you these questions. You may have seen this on TV, movies, whatever the case may be. I like to put puzzles together. Today's puzzle is this case. When I give it to decision makers, I want to give them a completed puzzle. Sometimes what he said and she said may be different from what you said. Sometimes the truth is in the middle. I want to give you an opportunity to explain your side. If I ask you 10 questions and you only want to answer 7, it's completely your choice. So I'm going to read you these rights. And if you do want to talk to me without a lawyer present, I'm going to give you that opportunity. And I think if you do it confidently, you do it fairly, I think most people waive. I don't think it's a huge bar to get over. And I think it's something that a lot of times in law enforcement, we complain about things. Hey, I would have got the confession if it wouldn't have been for Miranda, or, that darn body camera, or that darn, dashboard camera. Dashboard cameras and body cameras have saved false allegations that have been made against law enforcement for so many years, but we always complain about it and put that as an anchor for why we didn't, accomplish our task. So I don't think it's that big of a task, but it's how we read it. If I read it with a very high octave and I sound nervous while I'm reading it, that is going to be an emotional contagion to the person that I'm talking to as well.
Yeah, no, I mean it's part of the process. You have to do it, and like everything else. And I think video cameras in the interrogation rooms are a good thing.
Yes.
I think, the body cams, I was a big proponent of those things because
Mhm.
it's shown exactly what I thought it was going to show, how badly the public acts in certain situations and certain
Yep.
things. Plus, when you're talking about interrogation, right? Brett, you have somebody who confesses on video. What are they going to say? That, well, we were beating them in the interrogation room? Everyone just watched it, right? I mean, it's a big
Yeah.
bonus.
Yeah. And I think it does away with a lot of the characterization that people make on, you hear about Reed and strategic use of evidence in this, and it does away with a lot of the caricature that people think on what we do in the interview room. Sunshine is the ultimate disinfectant. And if I do good cop, better cop. I don't do good cop, bad cop. I talk to people just like I'm talking to you right now. And most people don't think that that's the way it is. Oh, I'm going to be screaming. I'm going to be disrespectful. I'm going to be making stuff up. I mean, there are false confessions. There are things I have to be careful about. I'm going to be extremely careful when I'm talking to a juvenile. I'm never going to fabricate evidence and say I have things that I don't have for a number of reasons. One, if somebody is susceptible to a false confession, by saying that may be the last straw and may push them to say something that they didn't do. I'm not going to interrogate people for 10 hours. I'm not going to bring in multiple interrogators. I'm going to be very careful about holdback information and making sure that I have information that I can prove that this is a solid, statement. I'm not going to reconstruct memories. People that do that, if somebody was drunk, they were drunk. I'm not going to reconstruct something that they can't remember. So we do have to be careful in the interrogation room. A confession is very powerful for conviction, but it's also very, very powerful if someone gives a false one, which we've seen in very high profile cases. So my fear, Joe, and you may have seen this, and I don't know if you've had other guests talk about this, is that some of the miscarriages are very, very small in number, but because of video cameras in the interrogation room, it's easy for people to see these miscarriages and think that that's an everyday occurrence. And as a result, they want to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say, you shouldn't be able to theme somebody. You should just use evidence. That's great. But how many times do I have cases that have evidence? Not a lot. Okay. So their view is I should just hit them with the evidence and then just say, okay, tell me about it. And that's not how it works. I
Yeah.
have to be there. I have to be able to say, here's the evidence. And John, look, I don't think you're that monster. I don't think you woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning with ill will in your heart. I think there were situational factors here at play that led you to do something that you normally wouldn't do. I have to be able to say those things and use analogies and metaphors, because if you take that away from me, there's going to be a lot of cases that stay cold.
Exactly. Crazy Mom, welcome aboard. Thank you very much for joining there. Membership, there's a link for memberships if those are interested. There's lots of different things for members in there. One of the things that I liked in the book is as soon as I see the word Shakespeare, because he was one of my favorite authors, but I think it was Shakespeare and Socrates, and he talked about
Mhm.
there's basically three things, and I wrote them down. It says words we use, the tone of voice, and the body language, right? So we talked about some of those things. So I just think the power of words. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
could you
absolutely.
explain that to us?
Yeah. So the kind of impetus of why I got into that was my best friend over the last 35 years is deaf. And since I was a young kid, learning sign language to try to communicate with him, I had to look in his eyes to see if he understood me. He had to look in my eyes to be able to understand me. And I realized how meaningless words are, is that we're always searching for the perfect word, but it's how we say the word that's so important. Meaning, when I would communicate with him and we'd be on the TTY machine, there would be an operator in between me and him that would be breathing life into his words. And that person would be crying, yelling. They would be animated to try to, once again, give some semblance to that communication. He never got that. Okay. When emojis came along, that was a godsend for him, but it was a detriment because he was uncanny in his ability to see hidden emotion. We've literally went from cave paintings to Shakespeare back to cave paintings with emojis, right? In that we have the words, lyrics, then we've got the soundtrack, how we say the words. So our hardware, how I basically change my voice box to deepen my tone, speed things up. Okay. Once again, to make things interesting for you. And then lastly, what my body language is, right? So it's like if I get a text from my wife that says, I'm fine, and there's no emoji, oh boy, right? I don't have anything to go on. At least if I'm on the phone, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. It's going to determine how pricey that's going to be from a floral standpoint, right? At that point, I'm
Yeah,
going to at
that
least
might
have
be a
an
jewelry
idea.
chart. Yeah, that
Yes,
might
or
be
jewelry, whatever the case may
a
be, right?
jewelry chart. Yeah.
But I don't use emojis. I've never used an emoji. And I think that's because I want to talk to people. I want to look at people because there's less likely to be miscommunications. And when you can bring your body language into the equation, and when you can have soft eyes and you can show emotion and not contempt, and you can give minimal encouragers. And right now, I've got my video camera right in the middle of the screen. Why? So I can look directly into it. Looks like I'm looking at you, Joe. But more importantly, I'm directly seeing you. So I can see if you understand me, and I can see if you're like, or you show like a little bit, I didn't understand that. So I know I can go into it a little more. Too many times people are talking, they're not even looking at you. They're just spewing their own words out into the universe, and they're not seeing how they're being received. So we're talking past each other. We're in asynchronous text mode, Snapchat mode. Then we're taking those snaps and those emails and those texts, and we're throwing them into Chat GPT and say, how should I respond to this? And we're just talking past each other instead of looking someone in the eyes and talking to them. And I think that is what we're missing. And I think in the future, people that can do that, because there's been studies that show 75 to 80% of success are soft skills like communication. People that go strictly AI and go into that that headset of communication are going to have real problems in this world. And we're already seeing it with some of our younger applicants that they have a hard time, getting their head out of that phone and
Yeah.
looking people in the eyes and communicating.
I've been saying this for years to my students. I go, I'm really worried about law enforcement down the road because 80% of law enforcement is talking to people.
Yes.
And you guys text your neighbor if what you want to eat. There's zero communication. So that's something that I worry about. So Flora has a great question. I'm glad she brought this up because I've always felt that the ladies do this the best. That
Mm-hmm.
use of silence. They'll ask a question, you'll answer it, and then there's no response. And then you kind of like
Yeah.
fill in the blank there.
Yeah. Silence is uncomfortable, and we always fill it. It's something that people teach, the intelligence agencies teach for espionage, because we don't feel comfortable with silence or intentional misstatements. People want to correct it. Those are two little heuristic hacks that you can use that are very effective. And women, I think, are the best communicators. They were the best polygraph examiners I saw when I was training interview interrogation, is because of that ability to, one, use body language, and also use silence, because we want to fill that silence. So a lot of times men like to hear themselves talk, and we just we feel uncomfortable with silence, where I think women are a little more adept at being able to navigate those waters.
I'm glad you said that because I said that on other streams. I always found that some of the female detectives were the best interrogators
Mm-hmm.
out there,
Mm-hmm.
much better than men to get to the bottom line of things. And it's just the innate ability sometimes.
Yes.
But this is a skill you can actually improve on, right? I mean, you could
Mm-hmm.
learn how to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nature versus nurture. For me, I was extremely introverted as a kid, but I had a speech teacher my senior year, Miss Bertrand, and she got me into improv acting. And it was one of those things where being able to think on your feet was so helpful for me. So little things like that, little things like just literally looking at people can up your skill set significantly, because observation, like I said earlier, you can see, are they receiving your message? And also, when you have that eye contact at a 75 to 80% rate, you come off like you're listening, even if you're not. Just the fact that you're just watching them. So eye contact, if you do eye contact and you do preparation, those are two easy things that any listener can do, and they're going to extremely level up as a result.
Yeah, one of the things that, like, when I get to like the interview interrogation chapters in some of the textbooks with the classes, I always tell my students, if you want to learn about certain things, go to YouTube or go wherever, find a video of somebody that we know lied, who did
Mhm.
an interview with the news, and then we find out 6 months later, and then go back and see if there were any tells. Or did you miss
Mhm.
anything? I think we mentioned this. I don't know if we mentioned it when we were talking before, but you mentioned like a micro kind of thing, like where people kind of just maybe, you know,
Yeah,
raise an
micro
eyebrow, that kind
expressions.
of thing.
Yeah, micro expressions are really hard to see in real time. I know Paul Ekman did years of research on that, looking at primates and trying to pick up universal things. I think macro expressions for me are there's more return on investment there. And what I mean by that is, it a lot of times when I meet people, I will raise my eyebrows just briefly because it shows warmth, but it also keeps me from showing contempt. So from a micro expression standpoint, that little furrow of a brow is the most it is a wet blanket on any communication, right? Really? Like anytime I do that, it's terrible. So I always tell my students, like, imagine you got duct tape on your forehead because you don't want to show that. All right. But another little hack from a detection deception standpoint is, let's say somebody's telling a tall tale to you, Joe, and it could be about, man, when I was in high school, I hit 47 home runs my senior year of high school. And you're looking at them and you're like, you're thinking, wow, really? One of the ways you can get that is you go from open mode to closed mode, and you just follow up a simple question, and you put the spotlight on me and say, no kidding, you hit 47 high school, home runs your senior year of high school. They were able to navigate those waters before, but what's the problem now? They have to say yes or no. And many times you can do this with your kids or your coworkers. Many times what's going to happen is they're going to say, well, I can't remember exactly how many it was, but it was a lot, right? Because they don't want to lie. So that's a good way to catch people without being disrespectful, without interrogating them, but just asking a follow-up question like, wow, really? You did that? And you'd be surprised at how, I said to the boss, I said this, and this. Wow, you told, Cindy that? Well, in so many words. I mean, it's amazing how something as simple as that can be very effective.
Right. I wish I would have known about your duct tape thing a long time ago, because I can't control my facial expressions sometimes when people just
Yeah,
say something. I'm
it's
just
hard.
like, you got to be kidding me, right? You're just like no,
Emotional regulation. And we got to be careful about it, Joe, because we are emotionally contagious to the other person we are talking to. So our emotions, whether we show fear, whatever the case may be, infect the other person and cause their reaction to be contaminated. So what we're seeing back from them may just be a mirror image of what we're providing. So we're not getting a true read on where they're at. And mimicry and body language mimicry is very important. I do it with a forward lean. I do it with nods. I do it by bringing my volume down. I do it by slowing my voice down. Standard de-escalation, hostage negotiation type stuff, right? I'll slow my blink rate down. I'll put my head down. I'll try to, once again, lower, the temperature in the room. But where we mess this up is where people automatically like, oh, his arms are crossed, I'm going to cross my arms. Oh, his head's turned this way, I'm going to turn this head. And you look like people see through that, and it comes across as disingenuous, when we do that. So buyer beware when it comes to those types of things.
right. Yeah. No, I mean, I was dignitary protection qualified, but they would never let me go on doing any of the hostage negotiation stuff because I did not have the skills to talk somebody off a bridge. I just didn't. And people have to know their limitations with this.
Yes, you do. Sometimes, look, when I talking to a child molester and they're saying that they molested 25 kids, internally you're like, I want to choke this human being, right? But the moment you do that and you display just that little bit, like I'm doing right now, subtle, these are people that have navigated these waters for a reason. They look at things. They look at, is there a father there that's going to hurt me? Nope. All right, that's somebody that might be, that I'd be easily victimized. Criminals do the same thing, right? When, how we look on a stop. There's a reason why state troopers look so put together, right? When they pull up, because they're on an island, back up maybe 15 minutes away. If they don't look like they can handle themselves or whatever, that criminal may decide, you know what, this is the time. I'm gonna now make that attempt. So how we look as far as confidence is important, right? Like, on the subway in New York, how do people look, right? Because when they don't want to be bothered, you got that. I think they call it like the New York subway stare, right? Leave me alone, right?
Yeah.
You have to disconnect yourself from that when you're actually trying to get information, because this is stay away from me. So duct tape.
Right. And also too, I mean, you see sometimes on television, right, where they get person at the guy hanging on desk. I'm going to bury you under the prison. Now, would you tell us what happened? And you're just kind of saying like, yeah, that's television stuff.
Yeah, it's
Nobody's going to talk to
television
you.
stuff. Nobody's going to talk to you. It's like, would you tell your friend something? Let's say you made a mistake and your friend, let's say you got in a breakup. What's your friend going to do? They're going to be your buddy, right? They're going to blame the other person. Oh, that idiot had it coming, right? I understand why you feel this way because it's a loss. It hurts. It's fresh. It's a ripped open scar. You diminish impact by saying, oh, there's tons of fish in the sea. you'd give them some analogies, and then you'd focus on the why and context versus the what. You'd be their buddy, like the exact opposite of what we see on NYPD Blue and some of the Hollywood shows. So absolutely.
What are some of the ways that we can improve our communication skills? Is there any tricks to it, or is there any exercises that people can do? Because communication is becoming a problem, like I said, and it's all because of cell
Yeah.
phones.
I'll give you a little quick hack. Something that I started doing about a year ago was, and not to give anybody free publicity, but there's some really good cell phone applications out there right now on how to improve your voice. And I've used them, and I've been very impressed with my vocal tonality change. I used to have I'm from the Midwest, so I'm very nondescript in my the way my voice sounds. But it was amazing how helpful that was by doing 5 or 10 minutes a day in just how I put my sentences together, how I end my words, things along those lines. And they're like literally like $1 a month, $2 a month, something like that. So without giving any publicity to that's something where people can actually hack something by spending a very minimal time in the day. And it's going to cost less than a cup of coffee.
So we have about 10 minutes left as we're closing in on 200 people watching this live. What can we learn about somebody in their social media posts, right? They're not actually talking, but they're typing or they're writing something. Like, what can we glean from that?
Yeah. So I'll give you for instance. So I'm talking to one of the worst molesters that I had ever dealt with. And it was one of these situations where on his social media profile, he was into cars. He was into, I actually knew what kind of food he liked. So that's the exact kind of food that we broke bread with. But also, to kind of go back to a pit bull, it's the second time we've mentioned pit bulls, his pit bull was all over his social media. And it was something that was just in the back of my mind. I didn't know how I might weaponize that or use that, but I just kind of organically brought it up, like, hey, do you have any pets? And he's like, yeah, my dog. And we talked about it, and it was the most important thing in his life. And so I just kind of held that in the back of my mind. And let me ask you, Joe. So what is it about pit bulls? Do they have a good reputation or a bad reputation?
Yeah, so they have a bad reputation of attacking their owners or their children and what have you, and
Yeah.
being very vicious.
Yeah, very vicious, unless they are in a good home, right? And they are taken care of, and that type of thing. So a whole, nature versus nurture type situation. So once again, I had that information. The individual, based upon the case facts and based upon my interview with him, I felt as if he was being deceptive about his involvement in this case. And it was one of these things where he had talked about also being molested as a kid. Didn't excuse it, right, at all. But it was one of those things where I used that information to basically say, hey, John, you've got a dog that's a pit bull. It has a horrific stereotype. Why? Because it's not raised the right way. It's taught how to fight. But a Staffordshire Terrier, that's what it should be called, because that's what it is, John, is a great animal if it's raised by a great person. Unfortunately, you're kind of like that pit bull in that something bad happened to you when you were little, and it changed your trajectory. It created certain vulnerabilities where in the wrong time, in the wrong place, when handled the wrong way, it bites. And I think that's what we're talking about here, John. I don't think you woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning with ill will in your heart. I don't think you're a monster. I think you made some poor choices. Now, that resonated with him, and it got him to admit to some horrific criminal activity. But it was by using something I had coming in, something that was important to him, and I used it as a metaphor. Okay. Now, do I feel he should be buried under the prison? Absolutely. Right. But I don't want him to feel that way. And look, don't get me wrong. When I'm driving home at 3 a.m. that night, I feel sick because of the person I was portraying myself to be in the room versus the person that I am. And when I come home and, I'm taking my daughter to school the next day, so that cognitive dissonance between what you say in the room versus the person that you really are sometimes can be difficult.
Right. And Viv, don't worry about it. We weren't talking about Mr. Darcy. We know Viv's got a pit bull. And then C. Taylor, when you were doing your little speech there about, John and this and that, that's good. Yep. You kind of hit that whole kind of thing. And so, yeah, most people don't realize how much information that they put out about themselves on social media. And it's a great investigative tool. And that's why it was one of the first things that law enforcement does, right? When something bad happens, they go right to the social media before they really do anything else these days.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, what did we do? We went and talked to their neighbors, and it was the old joke about every serial killer. What did the neighbors say? Oh, he was such a fine boy, right?
Yeah. Or he's
We
quiet,
truly,
never bothered
he's quiet,
anybody, right?
such a quiet kid, never bothered anybody, right? But it's amazing what people will put out there because we've been conditioned that way. We want the likes, we want the validation, so we put our entire lives out there. So just be careful about that. Not just because you're an applicant, but because people can weaponize that for ill will against you.
Right. Lisa Ribikoff just jumped in there. Hey, Lisa. What is the emotional toll that
Mm.
law enforcement goes through when you're talking to like the worst of the worst and you're interviewing them, interrogating them,
Yep.
you're
Yep.
finding out the worst details. What are some of the coping mechanisms
Yeah, no,
that
I'm glad
that
you bring
you
that up.
used? Yeah.
Yeah, so I've worked a ton of homicides, and for me, the homicides were easier. I mean, it's strange to say that, but it tended to be this person killed this person's buddy, and this was retribution, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I could almost, understand it a little bit better. When you're dealing with somebody that finds babies and they're sexually attracted to babies, and you have to talk to them and get them to say something, hopefully against their self-interest, that locks them up, it's very, very difficult because you have to go to some dark places. So one is having a good partner, a good friend that can see, hey, you need to take a break from this. And when I was in St. Louis doing 2 or 3 of these a week, luckily I had some friends that could do that. But also I had a great PhD, Dr. Stacy Chissette, out with Washington Internet Crimes Against Children. And she taught me some things in which I will never bring my work home with me. I never write my reports at home. If I come home, I will do like play a game of chess on my phone, just to get my mind completely invested. And for me, it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I have to be totally committed to that. So for the last 10 years, when I go on the mats, I will do that before I write up a case, because I have to be completely present when I'm on the mats, or somebody's going to choke me and do something really bad to me. So it's a way to kind of get my mind right. But I only talked about it. I never looked at the child sexual abuse material. We used to call it child pornography. Now we call it child sexual abuse material because there's no choice that these kids have. It's not pornography. So as a result of that, when they have to see it, it's very hard. So in the Secret Service, we were mandating having to talk to a counselor to try to make sure that, you were getting a status check and make sure that everything was good to go, because it's a toll that we don't realize. And it is, some people get PTSD from it because of the horrific images that they have to see.
Yeah, there was one. Actually, I saw it in the comment section, but I can't find it. The Secret Service is brought in on a lot of cases now with cell phone
Yep.
evidence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, since 1994, we were congressionally mandated. I was blessed to do the last polygraph in the Adam Walsh abduction case. It was right in your backyard with Evie Pomporis, great polygraph examiner, author, up in your area, former NYPD cop. But since 1994, we've done about 9,000 polygraphs associated with National Center of Missing and Exploited Children cases. And now we have one of the biggest forensic facilities. So a lot of people don't know that about the Secret Service. They think just protection, but we were founded in 1865 for investigation. So that dual role mission is something that I think interests a lot of your potential listeners if they are thinking about applying. Is you couldn't do protection for 25 years, you'd get burnt out. So investigations is one way to kind of mediate that a little bit.
Right. So there's lots of different things. If somebody is interested
Yep.
in it, you're just not going to be running alongside of a limousine, right? Like they do
No,
with
no, no,
Clint.
no, no,
No
no,
Clint Eastwood movies.
no,
Yeah.
you will not.
So last question I want to ask you: is there any movie or TV show that okay, here we go.
No, go
that
ahead. Go ahead. See, you
corresponds
see,
to
you're watching my body language here, Joe.
that somebody can watch and get an idea? Like, yeah, this is pretty close to reality of being a Secret Service agent.
No,
Got
there's not. And I don't mean that as a, I can't tell you how many times I've said over 25 years, well, that wasn't in the recruiting brochure. I got to see 40, I got to see 40 countries, and that's cool. And it was usually flying on a C-17. You'd fly over with the cars, the limousines, and so on and so forth. So you get a day or two on either side of the visit to see the country. And it was amazing because you see all these world cultures. And I think the best thing about the Secret Service was at the United Nations General Assembly, being able to protect. I mean, I think I missed 17 wedding anniversaries because my wife and I got married in September. And it's one of these things where I got to see 17 to 20 different world leaders and their protective details. Like, you get to see that the world is a big place. And you get to see that we think we have all these hatred or animosity during these other countries, but they're people just like us. And so I always think that was also helpful for me. And when I interrogated people, is because you'd see this, you'd have a different worldview, so it wasn't about Democratic or Republican or independent or communist. it was just people are people, and you just find a way to connect with them.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because the spouses of law enforcement officers
Hmm.
across the country deserve lots of credit too, because they put up with a tremendous amount of
Oh
stuff.
yes. Oh yes.
We broke the 200 mark. That was great, Brad. Listen, this was I can't believe how fast that hour flew. Like I said, we don't make sure you check out Brad's book that's coming out in a couple of months. Tell Me Everything. The link is in the comments section. That link will take you to a variety of places where you can pre-order the book. So do so. Get them out there and take a look at it. It's a great read. I got a pre-publication copy. Is fantastic, especially for those that are trying to get into law enforcement. I think it is a definite read. Brad, thank you very much. You hang out 1 second. We're going to say goodbye to everybody. You guys have a great night. We'll talk to you this Tuesday. Tony DeStefano, we're going to be talking about his Emmy Awards and his Pulitzer Prize for his work in organized crime. Talk to you guys soon. We'll see you then. Brad, hang out.